Wow. 20 plus? I mean, long, not to date us, but to date us. Yeah, long time. Long, long. Well, I remember walking down Vanderbilt Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. And I don't live in Brooklyn anymore. So, I mean, this film, we started this a long time ago. I remember Jenny calling me, and I picked up the phone. I was walking to dinner, and she was like, I think I've been just having really strong feelings lately and getting a lot of encouragement, and I'm gonna make this film Stuck that I started. How many years ago did you start before you made that phone call to me? Yeah. And that you called. Yeah. And and she's like, and you want to do it? And I have a part for you, and would you help me produce? And with anybody else, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, whatever. Are you actually going to do it? But when I know when Jenny calls and tells me that she's going to do something, that she actually does it. So I had to take a breath and be like, oh, do I have time for this? What does this mean? But of course, I said yes, and it just started the ball rolling. But since that phone call, I went out to the West Coast and lived there for 2.5 years, and flew to Texas for the 10-day shoot from California, and now I live in Beacon, New York. And Stuck is coming out during a pandemic while we are all stuck at home. And trying not to lose our minds. So it all feels very surreally appropriate. Yeah, that's how it happens. You make that phone call and you put it out there in the universe and you say, I'm going to do this, and who's going to be my team? And you're amazing at that, and amazing with your Texas community, and how you continue to ask over and over and over. I feel like the words that keep coming up to me during this time and that really resonate with you and how you accomplished this film is patience, perseverance, and resiliency.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's what we all need right now.
Yeah.
Um, so we don't have any other questions popping up. We actually have had a few questions
Yeah.
come in offline,
Yeah.
and one of those questions came from a friend of yours who watched the movie in Vieques.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, Claire. Hey, Claire. Choir member of mine. I sing with the Beacon Women's Rising Choir, and we still meet and sing together on Mondays, just through Zoom. It's not the same, but it's been an incredibly supportive community. And there's been quite a few women in that choir who have watched the film and have really enjoyed it and have been incredibly supportive.
That's so great to hear.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that the film could actually, like, through self distribution. I just turned off, didn't I? Okay, here I'm back. There's live streaming. It's fun. Um, I'm amazed that through self distribution, we're able to share the film with so many people around the world.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until yesterday that I figured out how we could share with people outside the US and UK by going through Vimeo. So Now we're able to watch the film on Prime, and you can go rent and buy it on Vimeo on demand, which is incredible. So her question was, there was a three-parter. The first part had to do with who you were at the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So tell us, were you that same woman as the woman at the end?
I was. The woman at the end is me, is the younger Mimi and the older Mimi.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to elaborate on that? Do you want me to elaborate on that?
Well, I'm curious if anybody out there that may be watching right now saw what the visual clues were. If you saw any visual clues that hooked those people up, hooked Jenny Maguire. So Jenny Maguire played the younger version of Mimi in the film. And spoiler alert, she's also the same person at the end of the film who's an older actress playing the same character. But there are some visual clues that pop up throughout. And I'll go ahead and give a visual clue right now. So one of those is a beautiful photograph that Jenny supplied of her and her baby daughter. Yeah. That you can see in the final scene to hook those two people up. So
I have a question for you, Jenny. That because my sister had a lot of the same questions as Claire. And I am finding that people the first time, I just talked to my dad. He has actually watched it twice. God love him, and he was having the same. Like he understood it much more the second time, which I think for his brain, he really needed that a little bit more of a linear experience for him. And some other people are like, no, I like the mystery. Mm-hmm. Did you intentionally make it as vague as it is and connecting certain characters, like my character to Tanya and to Joe? Like my sister was like, how are you connected to them? And, when I explained to her the scene where they mentioned that Mimi's not showing up,
yeah.
Like, is there a part of you that wishes or that intended it to be a little more clear? Or did you always want it to be more of a mysterious reveal at the end?
That's a great question. And Heath just said that he saw the photos on the tables and that gave him a clue.
Nice, Heath, nice.
Yeah. So, did I want it to be clearer? That was always a fine line that we were walking on. How much do we tell the audience, and how much do we try to tell the audience, and how much do we let the audience try to figure out for themselves? And that piece of it had always been hard for me. The piece about how does Mimi fit in everybody else's question. How does Mimi fit in with the story of Joe and Tanya, the bookstore story, right? So we have the Franny story, and we have the bookstore story, and we have kind of Mimi's own story. And my answer has always been, it's just that one comment in the birthday party scene at the refrigerator where Joe says she's not here, she's working at the bar, and everybody of course misses it because their brain is trying to keep up with so much information.
And there is the scene of me at the very beginning where I am giving advice to Joe, the Joe character, and she's like, "Oh, I wish that they had let her finish," like about us being best friends and stuff. But it's so early on, I don't think people know who those characters are yet, so their brains aren't putting it together.
Yeah, it was definitely a movie that I expected people to watch twice. Donna just said her dad and she watched it twice.
Oh, so sweet.
And that he understood it better the second time. And I'm glad to hear that. I think my uncle watched it 3 times to try to understand it. But I think that's part of the fun of the movie is you're always going to pick up something new the next time. And a lot of it is supposed to be the connections that you make in your brain. Your own brain.
Yeah, I remember you telling me like one of your inspirations was the Aronofsky film Requiem for a Dream. Things that are not so, that take you on kind of this emotional journey through these people's lives, and you feel very connected. I remember feeling very moved by watching Stuck on this visceral level, and it didn't necessarily need to connect all the linear dots in my brain to still feel satisfied. Because it's sometimes when you go too nonlinear, then you can turn people off. It's just like, I don't get it, I don't like it, I don't want to watch it. But I feel like Stuck walks that beautiful line of telling a nonlinear story, letting you have a visceral experience, but not going too far out that you then tune out.
Yeah, that was a hard part about it too, was I wanted to tell enough of the story conventionally that you could that anybody could kind of follow what was going on within any storyline, and you wouldn't be like, oh my god, please don't make me sit through this. Of course, some people are still like that, but that's okay.
That's okay.
And then knock it in with the nonlinearity, because it's set inside of the mind of somebody who is not thinking linearly. So what would happen is with critiques or audience members, they would get really frustrated because they wanted to go one way or the other. They were like, this needs to be more conventional so we understand it better. Or they were like, this needs to be more artistic. You need to just make it more and more surreal. When we did the audience testing, I literally had two piles of stuff. One was, we needs to be more, we can't understand, we need to follow it more easily, or you need to cut about 15 minutes out of this and just chop it into pieces. And I just knew from the beginning that the film I was making was a combination of both, and that was going to be dangerous, and I stuck with that. And I hope that has helped. I don't know what it did.
You know what you did. You know exactly what you did.
Yeah, every piece of it was very specifically thought out, and every time something didn't work or a resource didn't show up, it was like, okay, how can we make an adjustment that has integrity with the film, but honor the fact that we can't do what we want to do. Well, thank you, Donna. Here's what Donna had to say. Let me see if I can add it. It's fine the way it is. Thank you.
It is. It's a piece of art, and I think that that's what great art does, is that it leaves you thinking, it leaves you questioning, and it allows you to get what you're going to get out of it without, from your own life experience. So, do you have somebody who's lost their mind to Alzheimer's or to drugs or just to their own mental spin that we go in? I feel like right now we have to do great work to keep our mental capacities in a calm place and not be controlled by anxiety or not be controlled by, our inner demons, our inner thoughts. And I feel like Stuck is the essence of that, of where your brain or your wheels just get stuck.
Yeah, it's true. Keith also said, we liked it the way it is, and watching it a second time allows more opportunities to catch the extra details, which I agree with. Good. We hope to have some Easter eggs in there for you. And Donna says she can't wait to see what we come up with next. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, we actually did a couple of screenplay readings. When was that? 2 weekends ago?
Yeah.
They've been recorded, and I'm going to try to play them back. They're not going to be very exciting because they've been done on Zoom. But I'm going to play them back for an audience. Jenny was also in one of those.
Yeah.
And that one will be that one is set around cerebral palsy and
keep it simple.
An upstate town in New York and 9/11. So
yeah, which was interesting because we're going through such an intense time right now, and people are not able to process it all in the moment. And I had a long monologue in that screenplay that was all about 9/11. she had lost her husband in it. She had lost her mother in it. She was, she was a bit of a mess, but rightly so. And I remember one of the comments afterwards by one of the participants was like, I forgot that feeling because you wrote such a beautiful monologue about that day and about that time. And it's almost like we're able to greet that in our hearts in some way, in a much different way than we could, like you said, you didn't feel like people were ready for that when you first wrote it.
Yeah.
To be able to go there and,
Yeah. Very true. So, does anybody have any questions? Other questions that they'd like to have answered about Stuck? I'm just going to keep talking to Jenny Maguire until I see another question. Okay. So, Jenny Maguire.
Mm-hmm.
Go
Can
ahead.
I ask
Do you
a
have
question?
a question? Oh, wait. Okay. Here we go. Keep your question, Jenny. Keep your question, Jenny Maguire. I'm looking at 5 different cameras right now.
No, it's very confusing too because I have the live feed on my phone, and if I glance over, there seems to be a time delay between you and I and the feed.
Yeah.
So it's tricky.
It's very confusing. Okay. So Heath, his son, is going to study digital cinema. Very exciting. So equipment that we used, camera, mics, etc. All right. So Stuck was made over a period of 4 months, and we shot 4 to 5 days at a time. And basically, what I did to help us, we only had a $25,000 production budget, which is very, very small. So what I did is I purchased a Blackmagic cinema camera for the production. I purchased it used so that we could shoot on RAW, which you don't need RAW, but I was like, I want to have the best thing ever. So we had RAW. We're shooting on RAW. We were able to then sell it for almost the same amount that I bought it for. So it was really great on the cost benefit. I decided I wasn't going to use it, so I didn't have to pay for a camera. So the Blackmagic cinema camera was what we used for the whole shoot, except for there are a couple of scenes that we shot early on for the what was it? What was that thing called? The Kickstarter campaign, the original Kickstarter campaign, and we shot those on 16 millimeter. Because I wanted to actually shoot on different formats for different storylines. Each storyline would have a different format, but we couldn't afford that in the end. But I was able to sneak that little bit of 16 millimeter footage that we shot at the cemetery into the film. So that piece and the piece where Franny's in her room are 16 millimeter. I don't remember what specific camera. I'm sure it was an Aeroflex something or other. Then every time we went to shoot, we had a different setup based on who I could get to bring us equipment. So for the first section, which was the bookstore, and then the Franny stuff. Anyway, the first week of shooting and the last 2 weeks of shooting, we had this amazing angel named Rue Dwyer, who had a truck of equipment that he was no longer using because he decided to go off and be a financial investor or something. And he worked with us and did all the camera pulling, all the AC work on the bookstore. Couldn't work with us in month number 2. And then in month number 3 and 4, I could not find anybody with equipment. I had a very small amount to rent with, and I contacted him, and he actually gifted us with all that, all of our lighting, grip, gaff, sound. He drove his trailer to every location and left it there for us to use every day, and he would go study. So I have no idea what was on that truck. Then we also, Carissa liked, one of our DPs, got equipment from her alma mater, which is Stephen F. Austin University. And during that time, the guy who drove it out, I cannot think of your name, I'm so sorry. It's not coming to me. He worked as a grip gaff and drove the equipment out in the back of a truck, like literally in the back of a pickup truck. And that's where we got all of our audio grip and most of our gaffing equipment. So we would literally like find what we could when we could find it. There wasn't any, man, if I could have rented a truck. And our lenses were severely limited. We were limited to whatever we had on hand. I do remember we had to rent a specific lens one time, but if you want to know all that, I'll have to get you in touch with all the DPs, the 5 DPs that were on the
Can you not by putting you on the spot, but can you name off those 5 DPs?
Sure, I can. And I think it's Peyton Paulette is the name of the man that I'm thinking of.
I think you're right.
So our 5 DPs were Carissa Leicht, Eric Phelan, Jake H. Guy, Maximo Contreras, and Russell Blair. So 4 dudes and a chick. Yeah.
Do you know, have they all seen the film? Have they?
I don't know.
Yeah. I know Carissa has.
Carissa has. Mm-hmm. I heard from Ferris, who was one of our sound guys.
Oh yeah, we love Ferris.
He was very happy. Mm-hmm. And Jake saw it at the screen test. He came to the screen test. Yeah. So. And Donna's asking, is there a second part to Stuck? I don't think so. Although the other screenplay I wrote is about a country singer, like a Reba-style country singer in her late 50s, who's going through a transition. So some people would probably say that's Franny. It's not. Or it might be. I don't know. All right, Jenny Maguire, you had a question.
No, it was about that, actually. Like, I was very happy for that question because it was just one of the things that I found so inspiring about this process was your ability to get so many people to work for, a labor of love from the Dallas community. And I guess I just want to give you the opportunity to, give some love to the community that continue to, support you and show up shoot after shoot, month after month. And also, like, what was your thought process behind having to do 4 shoots? Because that's incredibly unusual to have 5 different DPs, to break it up that way. It's not how most people would approach a film, and it would be very hard to think outside the box in the way that you did.
Right. Well, the original idea to have the 5 DPs was that each DP would have a different storyline, and we would split it up between the bookstore storyline, because that also has its own production design. That's supposed to be like an 80s and 90s time that Mimi would have lived through. And then Franny's storyline, which is the 50s and 60s. So we would shoot it like 50s and 60s, and it would all the art design would be 50s and 60s style. Then Mimi's nursing home room, and then what else was there? There's something I'm obviously missing.
Ballerina,
Thank you. Yes, Melanie, the ballerina. And so it would have been 4 DPs. We ended up with 5 because one day I couldn't find anybody to show up. So we had to get like a last minute person to show up that day. So in like the Joe's house scenes, those were not shot by the same DP. A lot of times I was also moving the camera, which was hilarious. So Eric Phelan showed up, I think, every single day throughout the entire 4 months. Thank you very much, Eric. Carissa shot for several weeks. She came on early with me. Who else? Misty Fields, our assistant director, showed up almost every day for 4 months. Robert Wynn, our production designer, he was doing I think a play or 2 plays while he was working on this, he was sending Ryan Luskalede over to fill in spaces, and then we were filling in the rest of the art department. He would basically say, here's what y'all need to do, and we'd find some random people. Megan Bell was one of those people to show up that day and execute whatever Robert was thinking. And what was the script supervisor who worked with us on our section? Jenny, do you remember? I'm so sorry, my brain's not 100% there with names today. She and I would sit and do art direction, like in Melanie's house, to do Melanie's living room. We sat there and we would just find things in Vicky Cheatwood's house and put them on the table and create a big mess. Farish Shaheen was one of our sound recordists. He was there for 2 weeks. Holly Payton.
Holly.
She contributed 2 songs by her band Lev. Amazing, beautiful, wonderful. Go find Lev, L-E-V. She showed up for 2 weeks as a wardrobe supervisor. That's a fantastic story. I was looking for somebody. That's not what she usually does. She was like, I said, do you know anybody who could do this? And she's like, well, I can. That's an interesting story that I'd love to tell later. And so she did. And our fantastic wardrobe designer, Leila Heiza, who was also working on, I don't know, Queen of the South or something, simultaneously would put together all the costume racks, roll them out. Holly'd put them in her truck and bring them to the set and get everybody dressed. Delana Williams and Brisha Rodriguez, makeup. They showed up every day.
Yeah, they were amazing.
Laurel Heitzma,
yeah,
who was the first person to sign on when I said, let's try to make money and do this thing. And Laurel and I did so much work on parties and writing and social media. Rachel Dreiling, also associate producer. And then we had several backers who have just continued to give money. I'm amazed that people consistently, after 5 years, give me money.
And Rachel's daughter was in the film, which was really cool. And Rachel had kind of a magic ability. I remember you saying this before, of just like, we need a car. We need a T-Bird looking car. And she'd be like, oh.
I'm like, we need a Ford Mustang from the 60s in this color scheme. And she'd be like, my dentist has one. And I'm like, okay. So,
but I love those stories, because that's how independent film is made. It's not made by like, you're never, I guess the moral of that story, or the inspiration to young filmmakers, is like, don't get caught up if it's not going to happen the exact way that you think that it should within the boundaries of traditional filmmaking.
Yes, absolutely. And I have shared on my podcast probably about a dozen episodes about how we made Stuck.
Yeah.
So if anybody is trying to figure that out, or is just interested in stories about it, then go to my website. It's jennitooley.com. It's on the screen. And go to my podcast, and you'll find all kinds of stories. There's one that tells you how we crowdfunded everything. There's one that talks about our production, all the foibles and things, the miracles and everything else. So,
I mean, and we know post-production is incredibly expensive to do in film. If you do it through the typical powers, you know, it's like you can do a whole other crowdfunding campaign just to raise the money for the color correction, for the sound, which I don't think people know how important that is. If you have never been through that process, like, one of my favorite roles in this, in addition to being able to act in it, is being like a consulting producer, kind of like a right-hand man to Jenny if she ever needed a second opinion or a second eye or a second thought on something. If you're my daughter in the background, you know, she would call and be like, can you watch this? Can you look at this? What do you think about this? I'm trying to think through this. Having that sounding board is incredibly important, because Jenny did a lot of it herself.
yeah.
So, yeah. So my point was, post-production can be so expensive. And as a result of that, Jenny was like, oh, I can't really afford to play an editor. I can't really afford to play a color corrector. I can't really afford to play a sound. Oh, no, you did have your sound, which we got to give major props to.
Oh, yeah. So another answer to your question, Heath, is in post-production, what we used. In post-production, I basically edited everything on Final Cut Pro, whatever, FCX, whatever they're calling it now, FCX. And then our sound, our scorer and sound designer put everything through Pro Tools. And this required a conversion, like everything requires an extra app. We had to convert it and da-da-da-da. So and then I'll get to you, Jenny, in just a second. I'm just going to say quickly about color correction because I don't have a lot to say about that, so I can do it quick. I could not find a color corrector in Dallas to work with. I went through 3 of them, and nobody could work within my budget. And my budget was, I think, $5,000, which was a lot of money for us. I had to raise another $12,000 to do post-production for the film after we had spent our production money. So I had $5,000, and I couldn't find anybody in Dallas to do it. I was trying to go local, and I finally found through Carissa. She posted on some kind of Facebook board. I think it was a women in filmmaking Facebook board that we needed a color corrector, and a company in LA showed up. And I worked with a company in LA, and they did their best to work with me within that budget. So we just went back and forth across the country doing that. And then for sound, which is where we can talk a little bit more in the sweet spot. Hey, Brooks.
Hi.
Is Bruce Richardson. I got lucky enough to be able to work with Bruce, who I absolutely love working with. We've had a 20-year relationship, or 30. And he was willing to do the sound design and the score and help me work on the songs. So that took us over a year to get the sound design going. And if you saw the work in progress, so you would have seen a couple things. You would have seen a work in progress screening at Richland College because they allowed us to do one, which was great. And then we were invited to do one at Dallas Video Fest. If you saw that, and then you saw the premiere at Women Texas Film Festival at the Texas Theater a few months later, like it was a completely different experience. And the work that Bruce and I did in that few final months was like, we just had so many conversations. We'll do a Q&A with him.
Yeah, with Bruce, because that's an extraordinary creative process. Like I remember seeing an early on cut that you sent me before the sound, before the color correction, where it was just the story and like really raw footage. And I remember having the conversation with you about how important and vital sound and color was going to be in order to make this a cohesive, as you know, or to the film that it could be. Yeah. That without the color correction, without the intensive sound design, it's a completely different film.
And you know, along the way we were trying to get more funding from a variety of places, and I was doing the applications because I should. I do believe they may have been a waste of time, but I did them. I always knew, though, that nobody was going to be able to see the potential in what we were trying to do until it was done.
Yeah.
And nobody could. So that's also something to think about if you're a young filmmaker starting out, is if you have a bigger idea or a concept piece, it's just like, you might have to hold that those cards close to your chest until it's done, and then people will start to go, oh, now we see. Because there was no way that early cut was going to mean anything to anybody.
I mean, Bruce had me. I'm lucky that I have a little sound. I do some voiceover work, so I have a little sound studio in the closet, and I just remember how much fun it was to revisit some of the film. At one point, Bruce and Jenny, like I had to dub some lines because the cooler was they couldn't hear my line. You know, sometimes you have to go in and do ADR. You have to redub things that the sound wasn't right in the moment. it's very difficult on independent film to get the sound as quality as you need it, just because of budgetary things.
Yeah.
But the work that Bruce was able to do from afar, remotely, it was so satisfying, and just to witness you and Bruce work every day, building the landscape, adding another layer. They had me do all of these random wild lines from the script, so I kind of got to go back into the world a little bit, and it was actually really fun. I went back to a journal that I had written in during the shooting, and did things from that. And then they ended up not using any of it because
we used some of it.
just a little. But do you know what I mean? It's like, what do you take? What do you leave? How do you layer? How do you know when enough is enough?
Yeah, we had, our motto was throw the kitchen sink at it and then start taking things out. Yeah. That was how we went about that. And what you were talking about, all that ADR,
yeah,
that was the first thing we had to do. And Bruce spent months just going in and cleaning up all that sound. It was, we had to do the ADR, like Jenny said, over the bar scenes, because the coolers were on. We couldn't turn them off. We could not turn them off. We had a free bar. You can't turn the coolers off at a free bar. So there was just this horrible sound, and some of it you'll hear because we couldn't get it all cleaned up, and it was like, how do we balance all this out and then do all the ADR? But building those final pieces were fun. Those last layers and finding the voices that were in her head. That was interesting. Donna is asking if Stuck is going to be at a theater. It is. It is the theater closest to you, Donna, the one in your house where you've already watched the movie. I don't foresee it being in a big, a brick and mortar theater unless something miraculous happens. And you can't buy a DVD, but you can buy a download, both at Vimeo and on Prime. So, yeah, and you can stream it.
That's another shout out, is how, to Donna and to all the extras that were there who came out. Like, I mean, I remember Rachel and I sat, after, it was like all of a sudden the next day is the shoot, and you're like, oh no, we need people. Like, we need this many extras. And we would be emailing, people would submit things, and you have to go through it and see, okay, what's kind of right for this or that. Who's going to show up? You don't know. But then there's magical moments where, so thank you, Donna, and all the other, and it was so awesome. The woman who was at the diner, who was going to be an extra, and then we ended up kind of making her a part, and she had a lot.
Yeah.
It was awesome. But showing up at that diner that day, that was like basically completely art directed, like just as is.
Yeah, and that was one of those miracle stories. So if you're a young filmmaker, they're always going to tell you to write the script that you can make, and it's going to be like one location with 3 people and no background extras. And I tried. I could not write that script. I couldn't. I tried. So we made Stuck instead, and Stuck had 14 locations, 100 background extras, 25 people with principal actors and leads. And one of the locations was this 50s diner. And I had in my mind, like, it's got to be a 1950s, like, Jersey style, because that's where I was when I wrote it. So it's going to be, like, all chrome and leatherette. And I knew where we were going to shoot it. And we shot our demo for our first Kickstarter campaign at a really great, it was yellow instead of red, but it was a great diner for Franny. Perfect. We shot it there. And we raised the money. A year later, we'd go back to the diner and say, hey, we want to come and shoot this film, and here's what we're going to do. And they're like, yes, that'll be $10,000 a day. And I laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. Oh, my God. Because remember, our total budget was $25,000. And so Rachel went on a mission to find a place. And we looked at all kinds of places. Mama's Daughter's Diner, all these places. And I don't remember who it was. Oh, it was one of our backers, one of Laurel's friends, who was like, you should go to this diner called Rosie's over off of Ferguson. And I was like, great. So we went over there, and I walked in, I was like, oh my God. This diner is nothing like what I dreamed, but it's got like crosses all over the walls. It's totally the color scheme. All they had to do was put up a chalkboard and put a TV on the corner of the bar and put a little curtain that Jenny Maguire went to buy from the dollar store next door in a doorway, and that was it. It was incredible, and they also gave it to us for free. They gave us a deal on food, so we had Mexican food at 3:00 in the morning. Yeah, they were just wonderful.
The owner of that restaurant, I don't remember his name. He was so nice. Again, another like shout out to the Dallas community.
Yeah. Yes, Donna. Thank you. Thank you. Loved working with you, and thank you for all your support. You've been such a support through the whole thing. And I'm making that move around the screen. Y'all are probably like, what is she doing? There we go. This is my first live stream integrated with all these crazy techniques. Jenny, I know you probably need to go.
Yeah, I can hang out for like another 5 minutes.
Okay, cool.
I want to ask you too, I always feel like you did independent filming, you did it so beautifully by a bush. One thing, like you never gave up. It was always like, there's always going to be another problem. There's always going to be another challenge. There's always going to be another obstacle. And Jenny would take deep breaths, give me a phone call, and come up with a solution. And I remember, which is how things get done. Because this thing could have died 10 million times over, because there's always another obstacle. There's always another thing to try to accomplish. I mean, how long was this process altogether?
When do you mean from?
Like from the time that you called me till
till now.
Sure.
5 or 6 years.
Yeah. It's a long time. Mm-hmm. And there was a night that we were supposed to shoot at a rest home. Mm-hmm. We were going to have the final Mimi scenes and the beginning scene and the older Mimi in this rest home. And at like 11 or midnight.
It was 10. It was 10. It was only 10 p.m.
I get a phone call going, there's been a miscommunication. They're no longer okay with us shooting there. What do we do? Yeah. Do you want to elaborate on then what happened?
Yeah, and I did a whole podcast on this one. This is fun.
Okay.
So 10 o'clock, I get that email from Rachel, and in an earlier life, I would have freaked out. I would have been like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And instead, I was like, we're canceling this. We're not going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to email everybody. I'm going to cancel it. And
we did start thinking, like, initially we were like, what can we do to solve it? We were like, can we shoot at the apartment that I was staying in? Can we?
Yeah.
And decided to let it sit.
What we did was, I contacted Matt Ragland, who was playing Ethan, and Jenny Maguire, and I canceled it with everybody else, and I contacted Matt. I was like, hey, man, can you stick around for a little longer? Because he had to get back to New York at a certain time. And he was like, yeah, I can go throughout this weekend or something. And I was like, great. And the next, I went to bed. I was like, I'm going to sleep. I'm going to sleep now. I'm not, because Rachel was like, well, we could just show up. Maybe they'll change their mind in the morning. I was like, no, we're going to sleep. So we got up the next morning, and Jenny and I went to College Hungies.
Hard.
Yeah. We got up and we went to lunch at College Hungies and sat on the porch and ate vegetarian.
Yeah, if people don't know this place, it's this magical, like, Buddha, Zen, or is it Buddha? I don't know.
It's a Hindu temple.
Hindu. Sorry, Hindu.
It's actually a Krishna temple.
Okay, yeah. Gorgeous, with amazing food.
Yeah. So we sat outside and ate delicious food and chatted, and it just started bubbling up that this is what we were going to do. And it all fell into place the right way because we had lost the original, remember, we had lost the original location for Mimi's bedroom, for the young Mimi's bedroom. So originally the young Mimi's bedroom was going to be at one location, and then the nursing home room where older Mimi was are two separate places. So we were going to shoot young Mimi's bedroom at a certain location, and we had lost that already. And so we shot it at Laurel's house out of the kindness of their hearts. And that allowed us to, when we lost this location, say, oh, what if we have her be a home care, being taken care of at home? So she's in the same room. Originally they were supposed to look the same and everything, but different rooms. Now it was just the same exact room. So Laurel was and her family were very sweet and let us come back. We added it at the very end. It was the last day of shooting. Jenny Maguire didn't have to be there, so you had already flown home. And everybody was willing to show up for that extra day to shoot that. And within 30 minutes, no, an hour of having that idea, I had been able to rewrite the scene so that it would work, send out the new scene to everybody, confirm everybody's schedule, and everything was done. And that, it was meant to be.
It was totally meant to be.
Yeah.
But it's one of those lessons where it's like, okay, take a step back, let it go for a minute. And that's a big deal to tell everybody the night before you're going to shoot that you're not going to shoot. That's like something you don't want to do.
Especially if you're not paying them.
Yeah.
If we were paying them, we would have had to pay them for that day and then pay them an extra day. Well, some of them I think were pretty happy to have a day off. I know I was. So that was a big deal to say no and everybody to be so cool about it, which I think is a testament to how the set was run. So.
Yeah, another piece of advice is like Jenny is one reason how this film can get made is because Jenny is so multi-talented in her disciplines. Like she's not just an actor and a writer and a director. She also has mad technical skills. So you could edit. You could do some of the, all of the technical things. I mean, just even getting this up on Amazon. There's a million there's deliverables. You have to be able, and Jenny can do all that. So when you're in film school, like, be able to, if you want to make independent film and you want to do it on the cheap, get your skills honed.
Yeah. I
couldn't do it. I would always have to go to somebody else. And when you else, you either ask them to do it for free or you pay them money, which, so.
I want to pay people money.
I know. And I was saying to Jenny, I was like, I feel like the next time she's going to want to source out everything.
I want to pay people. Well, I want to be able to support people's careers. I want them to have reciprocity. And I want to be able to pay. I advocate for artists, so I want to be able to pay people for their work.
Absolutely.
But sometimes you just can't.
Sometimes an art is a labor of love, and so major shout out to you and the Dallas community for being able to produce an extraordinary labor of love.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And thank you for always being available. While I was alone in the post-production process going, oh my God, when is this going to end? Will I ever see this film completed? And then how many rejections did we get?
Well, it's been interesting in this process. It's been very satisfying to actually get some feedback, to actually have people be able to see it. And, the overriding theme is like, I really enjoyed it. I really felt connected on so many levels. I loved it. And I need to see it again. I have these questions. So I feel like one of the things that wasn't our friend for the film festival circuit is that people have the programmers they can only watch it once. And I think you got so much actually positive feedback from programmers, but I feel like they needed to watch it a second time, and they're never going to do that within the confines of how the film festival world works.
Absolutely.
What's exciting is that you don't have to take those no's and say, okay, well, it's not meant. You can be like, oh, really? Okay. Well, now I'm just going to put it on Amazon and put it out myself and be with the world. Right. Isn't that's the point?
Mm-hmm. That was it. We had a plan, and it was important to have a plan. All businesses need to have a plan. And all businesses have to be willing to change their plan when it's not working. So, going on the festival circuit, that's like the traditional thing that you do as an independent film. Well, it wasn't working for us. We were invited to 2 festivals without being submitted, but anything we submitted to, nobody was picking us up. And I was like, this is ridiculous. We're not putting more money into this. Let's just get it out there. And I was also like, oh, well, if we get it out there, we need to have a lot of professional reviews to support it. That's what you're supposed to do. And in my head, it just popped in my head. I was like, no, we're going to rely on user reviews. That's where this is coming from. We're just going to that's how I built a grassroots effort. We're going to keep it a grassroots effort. That's what's working. And it's working so far. We have a lot of great user reviews.
It's been exciting to see people like that we don't know, that aren't connected, that you're not, to just have an experience with the film.
Yeah. And that's really, I had to get real clear with myself about why I was putting the movie out at every stage. Mm-hmm. And at first it was like, okay, I want to be at Sundance and be this shiny, shiny new star filmmaker. Well, that did not happen. And that's okay. Because what it did is it got me back to why I actually made the movie, and it's to be of service, and for people to see it. That's all. It's just something that people can see, and everybody who sees it has a definite reaction to it.
You want to give a shout out to the 2 festivals that supported you in Texas.
So the wonderful thing that happened was I had this work in progress piece that I was just going to show for our backers. So I've been stewarding 200 to 300 people for about 5 years now. Anybody who backed the film or was a team member, I've sent out emails and having events and everything. So we get to this point of watching work in progress. I'm inviting all them, and I'm like, I'm going to invite Bart Weiss from Dallas Video Festival. Mm-hmm. He likes my work. He likes Bruce's work. I showed there years ago with Safety of Others. And I really didn't expect him to get back to me. But he did. And it was, hey, do you want to screen at Dallas Video Fest Alt Fictions? It's like, well, I don't think we're really ready because it was a week or 2 away. But I asked him, could we do a work in progress screening? Which it's kind of a ballsy move to ask to do a work in progress screening. And his answer was yes, which was amazing. So we had, what time was it? It was like a midnight screening or something. I was half asleep in the Q&A. And our sponsor there was Women Texas Film Festival. Justina Walford is the director of that festival.
Yeah.
And she was in the audience of the screening and had made a comment saying, I think we have a new voice in film with Jenni Tooley, and I was like, oh, okay. And I thought, I need to contact this woman. So I did, and said, well, whenever you're ready to open your submissions, we'd love to submit. And she was like, we're just going to go ahead and invite you in. And we want to have your film screened. So we were one of the first films that got scheduled for Women Texas Film Festival, and that's where our premiere was. They treated us so beautifully. I mean, didn't you have a good time?
That was the best. I mean, in that historic theater, what's the Texas Theater? Is it called the Texas Theater? Where Oswald hid out.
Yes.
what a gorgeous space. I mean, it's got so much texture, so much history. And the fact that we got to then invite the whole community
Oh, thank
that's
God.
a part of it. And we got to have that moment without it being like Jenny having to create yet another event to say thank you. Like it was, it was Women Texas Film Festival has an amazing program, an amazing festival, so welcoming, so
Mm-hmm.
loving, so supportive of female female filmmakers, obviously, but just her team. The whole atmosphere of the festival was extraordinary, and it was really the perfect place to share that film with the community that you had created over these 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And they. Because my ultimate thing was I wanted to have this big event to premiere the film. I wanted to have like Franny show up and sing, and we're gonna have all the bands show up that had. We have, whatever, 10 bands that gave us music. Talk about luck. We have so much music in stock, and that stuff usually costs a whole lot of money. I couldn't get
Matt,
my original songs. Go ahead.
who's in the film, Matt, who plays my husband slash. Ooh, you should address that little nugget too. That's always confusing for people.
Yes, so the guy who plays Jenny's husband,
Mimi's husband.
Mimi's husband in the movie, is actually Mimi's grandson who's in the room with her. So, spoiler alert, um, Mimi is in her room playing out all the stories of her life with the people who are in the room with her. So her grandson, I don't know if you, who's out there who's been around somebody who has Alzheimer's, like a loved one or a friend. Um, it's, if you have possibly played a part in their story that you have no idea what part you're playing. So in her room, she has assigned the roles of people from her past to the people who are with her in her present. So her grandson is playing the role of her husband in her mind. So yeah, he's the same guy. There's no incest involved, nothing weird.
I know. People's brains don't care.
Yeah. Did that answer that question well?
I played the part. My brain always had a hard time with it.
Yeah. Now, it came from my grandmother.
Yeah.
And just watching other grandmothers.
Sorry, I totally sidetracked you. So Matt, who played, what was Matt's character's name? My husband's character's name.
Ethan.
Ethan, yeah, thank you. Ethan, he's also in a band, and he provided music just to circle back around, and you can finish your train of thought that you were having.
Oh, yeah. So we had so much music. And I had tried to get a Switch Fit song, which I had perfectly fit into this edit with Melanie driving to the bookstore and snorting a Coke, and it was like, oh!
Yeah.
And they were gonna charge me so much money that I couldn't even consider it. So we had a whole lot of music. I don't know where I was going with all of that.
That you wanted to have a premiere.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I wanted to have a premiere with all the bands coming and playing music, and Franny would make an appearance, and we'd have food, and I just wanted to do something really wonderful and fun for everybody who had supported the movie for so long. But I was so exhausted, and I called Julia Dyer, who's a Dallas filmmaker. I've known Julia since the first thing I was ever in on film. I was in a treatment of her movie called The Playroom 30 years ago. And I was talking to her and telling her this, and she's like, why don't you just work with a film festival and have your premiere at a film festival, and everybody can just show up, and you can ask for they're going to give you free tickets, and you can ask for some extra free tickets and discounts, and let the festival throw the party. So that's essentially how that all worked out. I was like, yes, that's a much better plan than my plan, although mine sounded like a whole lot of fun. But I highly recommend doing that if you're a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And if you have a film that works for this, you can get the festival will throw a special kind of party. Like Women Texas Film Festival was throwing all these theme parties based on other movies.
Yeah, there was what was it? It was the rave one or something, or yeah, I forget the name.
I can't remember the name of that movie.
I know.
But
It was a smart. It was the packaging. I can feel the packaging. I can smell the packaging. I just can't remember the name. Anyway, it was like. Anyway, it's not gonna. Yeah, it was smart.
Yeah, being a filmmaker can require many roles.
That could be a good ending note.
I think so. Being a filmmaker can require many things out of you. So, yes, thank you, Jenny Maguire. I really appreciate you.
You're so welcome. It's always a pleasure, Jenni Tooley. I admire you. I respect you. I love working with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Right back at you. And Jenny's going to sign off. But if there's anybody else out there in our Facebook land who wants to give her some hearts and thumbs up, that would be great before she goes. And then I'll hang out for just a couple of minutes to wind things down or answer anything else that comes up. So thank you, Jenny Maguire.
Jenny with an I.
Okay, darling.
Bye,
okay, everybody. So whew, that was a long conversation. Oh, here come all the hearts. I think I'm on a delay. Yay, yes, Jenny Maguire is such an awesome force of nature. She and I worked on so many things together. I met her, where did I meet her? In New York. She was working on a short film. And she knew my husband at the time. They were actors together. And she said, I need somebody to help me with this short film. And I had just gotten off of doing a feature. I basically fell into producing by learning. Well, this was Stuck, actually. I fell into producing with Stuck. So I had written a script that I didn't think anybody else was going to be able to direct, and it was going to be a huge, big mess, and that I was going to need to do it myself because I couldn't possibly write all this stuff into a screenplay and have it make perfect sense. A lot of it lived in my head. So with Stuck, I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to have to do to make this film. I'm going to have to learn to make films. So I actually went out and made part of Stuck, which you'll never see. There's a whole other character, a storyline that got cut out of Stuck. And that's the Las Vegas storyline. I know. So I taught myself how to make movies by going to Las Vegas and making the first 22 pages of Stuck. I come back from that, and my husband and his friend were in the process of making a film called Montclair, and they couldn't find a UPM, and they were like, well, Jenny just came back from Las Vegas. Let's see if she wants to be the UPM. And I was like, sure. Oh, my God. So I was the UPM and co-producer on a feature called Montclair. And then after that, Jenny Maguire contacted me. She said, I'm trying to make a short film. I need somebody who has a mind that can do UPMing, so unit production managing. You're basically the person who's driving the bus and getting everybody where they need to go. You're scheduling, you're doing all this stuff. You are the person that is in charge of equipment and locations, and on a ultra low budget film, you're probably also producing most of the film. So that's where I met her, and we did that together on a little movie called Somewhere in the Middle, which premiered at South by in 2008 or 9. And we just kept working together from there. So it was really good. We did another film. We did one of Keith Uncall's movies, a short film called Break, which also has shown on the film festival circuit. So yeah, Jenny Maguire. I'm grateful I got to work with her. And I'm trying to think. She and I covered so much. I was going to cover some things like I'm used to talking to myself. I was an only child. It's the pandemic. I talk to my cats a lot. So I was all prepared to talk to myself, unless people had questions, which I'm not seeing any questions come up right now. But I think that she and I covered everything. Let's see. questions about the movie? Yeah, I cover a lot of it in the podcast, which is on my website. And let's see. Yeah, if I'm at a loss for words, that probably means I'm done. So, just a huge shout out to everybody. Oh my God. Talking to yourself could be my next movie. Yes, Donna, it could be. That seems appropriate right now since we can't put together. That's actually my next movie. People are asking me about that, so let's talk about that. I have 2 scripts that I mentioned earlier, and you can watch those. I'm going to get those up. They're not finished pieces. You're going to get to see some readings of them and get feedback. The two scripts I have on the shelf right now, I wrote like 10 years ago, and they are... they're going to be hard to produce. And Stuck had a lot of, it was an art film, which meant that you could get away with a lot as far as money, and making things a little more artsy. Or if something didn't work, I could squeegee it up in the edit because it was an art film. Whereas these 2 films are not, they're going to really require solid productions in order to get them into post-production in a way that they're going to work. And those films are like $3 million and probably $10 million. Stuck's total budget was $50. If you add in all the pro bono time that people worked, it was approximately a $250,000 film. So jumping from there to a $3 million or $10 million film is a significant jump. Which means I've been thinking about other things to do. And quite honestly, I don't know what the next project is. We are in a pandemic, and it's going to be interesting to see what that does to filmmaking. I may be writing a book because I can write a book by myself and work with an editor online. It is hard to make a full-blown movie without having, 5 to 100 people in the room at the same time. So this actually gives me a lot of time to develop a film, and that's probably what I'm going to do, is I'm going to develop a smaller film about an aging ingenue. That's really where I'm going right now. I'm an aging ingenue. That'll be a lot lighter than Stuck. And as I develop it, I have time, and I have the resources right now, and people are a little more available. So we can really develop that script and make a smaller movie so that maybe we can then jump to 3,000 or a $3 million movie. And I appreciate this, Donna Swan. You can do it. Yeah, probably. Maybe. We'll see. 3 to 10 million is a lot. Some of my other films are a little bit easier sells, so maybe we can do 3. But this other film would be a smaller film, and I would do it very much the same way. This smaller budget film, I do it very much the same way that I did Stuck, meaning I would build my audience from the very beginning, and develop everything so that everybody can be along for the whole ride. I think that's one of the great things about being a micro-budget filmmaker. And the way that I'm doing it is to make myself completely accessible. I don't want to say completely. Very accessible. So people get to go to do something they don't usually get to do, which is to be along on the ride. And just build that community again and keep the community that we had. Just bring them along with us so that everybody gets to be a part of the writing of the film and the pre-production and the production and see all the inside out and then get to celebrate the final chapter. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. We've been talking about this film. If you haven't seen it, you can find it. It's on Prime Direct. It's on Vimeo VOD. Working on getting it some other places. My sales manager is a little bit slow, but we're getting there, and we'll just sign out with a little bit of music. You can buy this music that's in the movie. You can go to my website. This is so exciting. You can go to my website. You can buy the 2 songs that I and Bruce and Steven wrote together directly off the website. And then also on my website, you'll find links to Lev and Ten Hands and Salim Nurullah and Nello, which are the other songs, and you can buy their music. So we'll just sign out with some Shade of Blue. Thank you, guys.
Went for guys who didn't know my name, drowned to the bottom of a bucket full of shame, kicking ass, missing you. Everything's a different shade of blue. Lost my sass, lost in you. Everything's a different shade of blue. Don't know much except for what I was told. Waiting for everything just to take hold. I'll kick my ass, lost in you. Everything's a different shade of blue. Lost my sass, lost in you. Everything's a different shade of blue.